In 1995, Daniel Goleman published Emotional Intelligence. The book sold 5 million copies in the next 5 years and added a new term to the management lexicon, emotional intelligence, or EQ. Goleman described what EQ is, namely 4 steps: self-analysis of core emotions, self-control, empathy, or the ability to analyze core emotions in other people, and finally, relationship management. He also demonstrated why EQ is more important than IQ for the successful manager. However, while the book described the why and the what, it omitted to answer the question how. How do you discover what are your core emotional drives, and how do you control them? A few managers have natural empathy, but the rest of us don't. How do you develop empathy? And how do you learn people skills? When I first read Emotional Intelligence, I knew I had the answer to the how, the Humm Wadsworth model of core emotions. I first discovered this model in 1973 when I came to Australia. My tutor at the London Business School was the well-known management guru, Charles Handy. He described the key to business success as being able to handle the one-on-one meeting. He advised me to turn down the job offer from McKinsey's in New York and become a professional salesperson instead. I followed his advice, emigrated to Australia, and started work. There I discovered the Humm. The model, based on the first personality test ever developed in 1935, analyzes people in terms of 7 core emotions, which are listed here. Okay. I used the model very successfully in my selling and management career, and I subsequently wrote Empathy Selling in the early 1990s. I've actually written 3 books. The first, Enterprise and Venture Capital, was published by Allen & Unwin in 1989. It's since become the handbook of the Australian venture capital industry and is now in its 4th edition. The second book, Empathy Selling, was published in the early 1990s, in Australia by McGraw-Hill and in the UK by Kogan Page. The third book, the Humm Handbook, Lifting Your Level of Emotional Intelligence, was published in July 2007. The driver for the third book was my older daughter, Louisa. She had been appointed a manager with Perpetual Trustees and indeed was managing 30 people before she was 30. And she turned around to me one day and said, "Dad, what management book should I read? You've read them all." I said, "Louisa, the most important skill for a manager are people skills." However, when I try to think of a book to recommend to you, I can't think of one. I'll tell you what, I'm going to write you the book myself. And thus, the Humm Handbook was born. You might be curious about my accent. While I was born in Bath, England, my father was in the American Air Force, and we spent the first 13 years living in the USA. We then returned back to England, where I completed my education at Cambridge. My first job was with IBM as a trainee system programmer. I then did my MBA at the London Business School, where I graduated with distinction in 1973 and decided to emigrate to Australia. I then worked here, the IT industry, progressing from a salesperson to a general manager with TNT. At the age of 39, I had my midlife crisis. I was in a rut, and someone said to me, "Just remember, a rut is a grave with the ends kicked out." So I changed careers, became an investment banker, and started the retail funds management division with Bankers Trust. In 1984, we managed to obtain one of the 7 venture capital licenses handed out by the Australian government. And we were the first of those 7 licensees to raise our $10 million. That started my career in venture capital, and I retired from that in 2007. During that period, I was a director of some 30 companies. I was chairman of Never Fail Springwater for 5 years in its high-growth phase before it became a publicly listed company. I was chairman of SciTech Conv Commerce. While I was on the board, raised some $20 million from investors and returned some $100 million, a 5-fold return. Finally, in 1994, I co-founded Nanyang Ventures, and we raised some $140 million from institutional investors. Currently, I'm a fellow of the Australian Institute of Company Directors and a senior fellow of FINSIA, which is the professional institute for the financial services industry in Australia. Marcel Proust once said that the voyage of discovery consists not in finding new landscapes, but in finding new eyes. And that's my current vision, putting a set of glasses on everyone so they look at each other differently in terms of their core emotions. Accordingly, I've positioned myself as Australia's leading expert on practical emotional intelligence. More information is on the website www.thehumhandbook.com. Please contact me if you're looking for a new professional speaker with a solid record of commercial success. I'm not a consultant. I'm not a one-minute motivator. On the other hand, I do believe I bring a fresh approach to business ideas. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you.